There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah. Can you see that?
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay. What I've given you for handouts today actually follows this slideshow. So if you've got that, or you know where it is, you'll have it later if you don't have it right now. There's just a couple of things that I added in on this because hopefully I'm not reverberating in your ear. Are you getting feedback from my volume?
No.
Okay. All right. Then we'll start with reading and recording death, marriage, and birth certificates, because that's just the first part of the advanced routine that I've been working with you for the last couple of weeks on advancing your strategic skills to analyze. And there really is a very, very simple process that you learned as a kid, probably, to be able to do this. Any kind of a certificate, whether you have a will or you're going through probate records or you're going through a title for property, or you're going through death certificates, marriage certificates, birth certificates, or whatever, all of those are what we call intellectual technology. Now, today we look at technology and think of it as being electronic or something that we can do something with that way. It's ironic because as we invented and looked at death, marriage, and birth records, we were doing just that. We were inventing a piece of intellectual technology that people could get hold of and that they could analyze. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to be very active with what you do. So the first thing, of course, that we can always do when we get any kind of a certificate is we can do our happy dance. Don't let it be the end at that point. Yes, you know, I'm not any different than you. I'm an experienced researcher. When I got some of my first actual death certificates, birth certificates, marriage certificates, I was amazed. And I did a happy dance and I looked at a few things. And then when I looked again 6 months later, I realized I'd missed a whole bunch. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I'm willing to bet you have. I'm going to teach you to use a scaffolded. That is a step-by-step process to ensure that you thoroughly read, analyze, and document your certificates, and you begin to do it consistently. Even if you're in a registrar's office and you've just gotten that death certificate, or you have just gotten a particular certificate and the office is closing and you've got to go down the road. No, pull over and park in order to look at that certificate. And then within a certain amount of time, hopefully quickly, you're going to go after it with the scaffolded process that's really quite easy to do. How you read a certificate makes a big difference to you. That is, you have to be active. You can't be active for just 1 minute or 2 minutes or whatever. You are going to get the most out of that piece of intellectual technology if you take the time to focus fully, ask powerful questions, and then actually write notes and write a summary. And then there are a couple of places that we're going to go into next time that you can put that piece of information into. This is true power. How you read and take in information powerfully shapes your brain. And even if you think you're getting older and your brain is no longer letting you gain the experiences that you had before, these strategies can help you grow and retain your brain power. Your brain rearranges itself each time it reads a new type of information. When I went to Lake County, Montana a few years ago and I wanted to look at property research, and I found the most different kind of property information I had ever seen. It was all totally kind of pictures and sketched information rather than being actual documents. Boy, did I ever have to rearrange what it was I thought I was going to do. Carolyn, I had to take pictures then. That's unusual. The tools, yeah, the tools we use to manipulate information, our reading and our writing and anything when we use the net, work on how we use our brain power. And you've got to deliberately select what you're going to use in order to get the most out of what you're doing. What if you're at your Aunt Jane's and she has some precious types of documents? She has church records, actually, and their baptisms. And she says, now that's my only baptism certificate I've got on that, so I'm not letting you take it to scan it. Well, we can take a picture of it or whatever. But while you're reading it and just saying, let's see what kind of information I can get from this particular document, you need to be doing that in a very, very powerful way. And then you need to take time to write and transcribe and so on. You're going to glean more when you're active and you're purposeful. Now, those questions, that very, very easy scaffolding of things to do involves these big standard W's plus how, but who, what, when, where, why, how. And as I say, for some of the things that you'll find. You need to be purposeful instead of saying, hey, I'm really happy. I got this death certificate. It's really cool. I'm going to put it in a plastic casing now. You need to go after that document with who, what, when, where, why, how, and so on. And then your other questions. And you need to do all of that without writing on that document. Hopefully by that time you have used information about the county or the country from which you obtained the document. So you know when official registration began, you know who did it, what the document looked like, how were informants used. In Great Falls, virtually a month doesn't go by when we at the library have people saying, I'd like you to get the birth certificate, the death certificate, name the kind of certificate from 1887 for my relative, just assuming that because the county started then, that it would give you that information. Sorry about that. And I can tell people that all of that, even if it was supposed to be there, none of that was there for true until 1907 in Montana. However, I can tell you that I can give you the marriage documents. That's not a problem because we started recording those the minute that we had the first marriage, but not birth, not death. So they'll have to look for it differently, maybe in church records. Your reading acuity is going to grow as you become familiar with types of certificates. And your sense of importance to you changes as you grow in those capabilities. You're going to find that you're checking out things where people say, well, I happen to know that your grandparents got married on April 29th, 1905, because my grandma was there. And that's what she says the date is. So you've got your date wrong on your records, with me calmly saying to the person, well, I do have the certificate. And it reads April 30th. And it reads the time. I'm happy to send you a copy of that. You need to consistently apply these questions because they're going to help you with information like that. One of the first things you can do is go back and read certificates you already have received, because you're going to learn something new probably. Now, the process I'm going to teach you today, I use just a big piece of butcher paper, a big piece of legal size paper or whatever, or you can use sticky notes, but I'll warn you, you'll get sticky notes everywhere if you do this with them. You have to be an active reader. And so you first read it and you look at that document carefully. You look all the way through it. Then begin to analyze those fields by using those questions. Who is this about? When were they born? When did they die? Depending on it, maybe I'll just use within this, I'll use examples from a marriage record, because that is one thing that yields so much information usually, but that we teach people that might be a document they want to find first. So who were the witnesses? Who went and got the license, if you're so fortunate to be able to get the license and not just the certificate? When you walk into courts, you're going to ask, I know you have the certificate. I've seen the certificate. Would you also possibly have the application? Wow, true power there. Once you have done all of these questions, looked at them, remember, you need to formulate a question for every single space on that document that is completed with information. Then you're going to make an entry into your timeline, because that's what we call a running record. That's an assessment skill, by the way, over in education. A running record is that kind of thing that lets you know that you have the information and tells you where you got it and records what you know at that point and what you think about it. It's brief. It's just a small paragraph inside of your timeline, but it can really help you later on. 6 months from then, you might not remember what you were looking at or what hit you squarely in the forehead. Then you're going to use this strategy to record the data properly in the person's file. Now, I'm saying now, but we'll actually take a look at that next week, and I'm going to show you some easy peasy ways to do that, and to make sure that as you're handing your information on to other people in your family, they know not only what information you got, but what frame of mind you were thinking about as you got it, if you choose to share that, and what it looks like. Then you're going to make a digital scan, create a PDF. And, some of you who know me know that one of the things that I give to my people at Christmas, anymore, it's on demand, but I give them a thumb drive with everything on it, again, under the theory that they probably lost it already from last year. But I give them a thumb drive with all the information, so that I know that if something happens to me, someone somewhere has got their thumb drive. So you ask the questions which are answered by the information, and you do that again by laying out a large piece of paper, placing the certificate on it, or you can put it on the table. Don't write on the certificate. And please, even when you're writing questions, only use a pencil. Take a look at whether the source is credible. Is it even legible? Did you find some inconsistencies or some conflicting information with, as compared to what somebody told you? Remember that other relative of mine who said April 29, not April 30. Learn to ask those questions, record all the information you find, and then summarize. Do it right away. Reach a reasonable conclusion, and then write any of your next questions. You see, as you write the simple questions here, and you get the answers to those simple questions, you're going to formulate some other questions that are not bonus questions at all. What they are is they happen to be the next level of questions about your family that can take you towards the next piece of information or whatever, or make you puzzle about that particular document. You're going to learn to judge the source. Did it give you information that can be corroborated? Is it incorrect according to family lore? How else could you prove the accuracy? Enter and document your observations of the time and the place and the event in your timeline. Maybe the only document available is a baptism certificate. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to show you some things that are interesting, very interesting. I'm sure my dad never saw his original birth certificate. Then you're going to write new questions and put new questions into your timeline. So what's in a marriage certificate? I told you earlier, try for marriages first, because they have bonus things in them, like witnesses who may be relatives, like parents, like occasionally you'll even find a note that was included, like, please don't let my son be married because he's not old enough. And believe it or not, if you're back looking at applications, many times you'll find things just like that, with parents saying, he's only 17. He can't get married. And you just pronounce them. So it's a little late. By looking at the application for my grandma and grandpa's wedding certificate right here in Great Falls, I found my great grandma's maiden name. Of course, I don't remember my dad ever mentioning it. Maybe he didn't know it, but it enabled me to go back another 7 generations once I had that maiden name. So it was pretty important. You might find a record of intention to marry. You might find bands if you're looking at stuff in Ireland or even in the Eastern United States or in Canada, whatever, in England. You might find marriage bonds to ensure the legality. There's some great ones in Kentucky, I can tell you. You might find just a marriage return saying the names of the couple and the date they were married, or registers, or notes from parents giving that permission or non-permission. This one, I'm hoping you can see on your screen enough. This happens to involve my brother, Con. And it just says that he was 50 when he got married, and the bride was 38 when she got married. And I can see that one of the witnesses is my brother, Mike. Now, that's pretty cool. It occurred in 1987. And what this marriage certificate doesn't tell you is, I believe this was marriage number 5 for my brother. So there's nothing in there. If I could find the application, maybe there would be more information there. But if I just saw this by itself, that would be a lot. So I can get the information that a pastor completed the marriage ceremony, that the license was gotten on April 23 and they got married 2 days later. And I've got the names of the contracting parties and the names of the witnesses. So that's pretty good. This is Con's first marriage in Montana. And he's had 4 in between there that I can determine. He might have even had at some point a 7th marriage, but in Alaska, but I've never been able to find evidence of that. This tells me more. This is a pretty neat kind of statement. This is a marriage certificate from the state of Montana, and it recorded in a summary document. There will be another document for this. There's an actual marriage document and probably a longer type of application in Missoula County. But this for the state records his name. It records the bride's name, their ages, their birthplaces, whether they were single or divorced or whatever, their parent names. Wow, this is pretty cool. The date of the issuance of the marriage license, the date of the marriage, and then when the State Board of Health got that certificate. How fast did it get in there? That's an important date because sometimes these people, they took quite a long time to get those things, various places. So that's a first one. And it does let me know some important information on question 8/16, the fact that both of them were single. And then right next to it, it says the number of marriage. It says there was no previous marriage. So that gave me some more information again. Now I can formulate a question for every single statement here, and I should. What was Con's father's name? And by the way, that name, Byron Robert, no, it was Byron Robertson. So there's that little ticking thing in my brain saying, well, it's not quite right, but it's close. And I can find some corroborating information for that. His mother's maiden name, Inez G. Beck, Ethel's folks, who they were, when did that occur? It doesn't tell you that it was at a Lutheran church in Missoula, but it gives pretty good information. So let's look now at what's in a death certificate. Boy, that has a lot of information or not a lot of information. You've all probably gotten death certificates. Hopefully, you're going to take time now with those to go back and look at the name carefully, look at the date, the place of death, the age, the date of the birth, if given, the parental place of birth, the names of parents, the maiden name, length of residence at a present residence, the cause of death. Was there a funeral home? Because you can go after more information there, possibly. Where was the person buried? And who was that informant? Because it could be a relative.
Mm-hmm.
That one's going to provide information on a person's birth, spouse, or parents. Let me show you an interesting one. This is my mom. When I got this Montana certificate of death, all that was filled in on the original form, because this is an amended form right here. All that was filled in on the original form was her name, her address, where she lived in Ferndale or near Big Fork, Route 1, Big Fork, Montana. And then the doctor signed what the death was, a cerebral vascular hemorrhage, with the date. When I got it, I was dumbfounded because there was nothing there otherwise. And I had paid good money for it. So I contacted my sister because she had worked, even though she didn't work at this time, she had worked for the county in Thomson, Montana. She had worked for Lake County right in that very office, and said, Susie, that's her nickname, Susie, what can we do about this? And she managed to get things done. But I wanted to know what the story was. Why wasn't a lot of this stuff filled in? Why wasn't it filled in that she was a registered nurse? Why wasn't there information there from an informant? Because my sister Mary, Susie Fulkerson, became the informant here. Why was nothing in that document? Well, because my mom died in a Catholic hospital. She was Catholic, but she had signed a statement beforehand saying that she chose, if she had something like this, a hemorrhage or whatever, she chose to have no food, no anything, and to be allowed to die. And the process took not quite 2 weeks. And they would not fill in anything else, being that it was that particular hospital during that particular time. So when you get these, you have to wonder sometimes, is there a second document? I mean, with this, my sister was quite accurate and could fill in all of the things that had to be there. So that was a pretty important thing. But think of what would happen if you got this thing that said, oh, here's the informant. It's a doctor and he don't know nothing. So here's my summary that I began to write. I'm just doing just a little bit of it, but it happens to be in the timeline that I've got just for Inez. It's not in the big Lee timeline, but it says Inez Genevieve. She was called Jenny Weeds Beck Lee.
I'll get a newspaper, take Jackson with me. He's going, so don't look for him.
Her revised death certificate provided a great deal of information. Well, I know most of that information is going to be helpful for her grandchildren and future generations to know that she was born in North Dakota and so on. So I'm telling why I'm writing this brief summary. That's important because I won't be there later on. Only that timeline of her life will be there. The informant for all the information, since it doesn't say, are you her daughter or whatever, I'm saying the informant for all the information was her daughter, Mary Louise, Susie Lee, and later her name happened to be Fulkerson and then Chubb. I put all that information in because what if those succeeding generations don't know that? They might still be back there puzzling and saying, who was this? Who was this particular person? So when you write a summary, there are neat things you can put into that summary that show that you're aware of future readers. That's what good genealogists do. They're not just recording information that they found, but they're interpreting that information for that future audience. What's in a birth certificate? Could be just a baptismal record, could be a civil registration from a state. But hopefully, we hope that there's a name, that there's a gender, a date and place of birth, names of parents, the mom's maiden name. Oh, we hope there might be a hospital or whatever, or so on. As you can see from my dad's, and we'll look at it in a minute. It's interesting to see what's there. Don't forget that you can be asking for a delayed birth certificate, and they're different. The proof can be many things. If you get that proof, for goodness sakes, on a delayed birth certificate, make sure you ask them to flip it over and record any information on the back of the certificate, because sometimes it goes over to the back and there's no record of it. Why did people have delayed birth certificates from about 1936 forward? Because they had to provide proof, first of all, to get into the Social Security system, to apply to get in, and then later for their payments, etc., when they retired.
Mm.
So here's my dad. Date and place of birth was May 2, 1911, near Havre, actually, out at 10 miles south of Havre. And it's a little more than that, but out at Crown Ridge Ranch. And that's what's recorded in family lore. But all we've got here as residence is 10 miles south of Havre. But wow, this is interesting. I know my dad is Byron Robertson Lee. What the heck is this? It says George Eskew. Huh. What's going on? Well, it has his parents' names there. It has where his dad was born and where his mom was born. And that's about it. But I'm grateful for this. This is the one that I'm sure my dad never saw. Why? Because he never mentions being George Eskew. And there's a whole story behind that.
Oh, I bet.
So here's the summary on Byron Eskew. Byron R. Eskew became Lee. Birth certificate. Number 1 is ink stained and it's difficult to read. I want my family to know that in my notes on my timeline. His original name appears to be George. Ooh, that's scratched out. And later on, it looks like Byron Robertson Lee is put in there. And the parents are Oscar Eskew and Mary Nanick. He's born south of Havre in Choteau County, not Hill County, in Choteau County, Montana. Well, in 1912, the year after my dad was born, his dad went to court in Havre and had his last name changed from Eskew, the name of his stepfather that he didn't especially like, and he had it changed to Lee. And his mom told a fib. That is, Oscar Lee, his mom, Marianne Coglizer Eskew, told a fib about his, that she had been married once before, she hadn't, and that her husband was George Lee, but then he died before, he died not long after they got married. They were never married. So here's what my dad does later on. I had not seen this until recently. This is a certificate of delayed birth registration. You want to look for these. My dad filed this, it looks like, in order to get into the Social Security system. Only now he's filing it, and he's saying that his proof comes from Hill County. So Hill County has occurred in the place of Choteau County. But if I were going to go look for those records for his original birth, I have to look in that previous county. So here's his proof. He gives 2 things, and there's a thing here that says over. Notice down here it says number 3, over. It's not out online. Wow. I'm going to have to go look for that in Havre. But it does tell where his dad was born, Oscar L. Lee, no mention of Eskew, born in Weeping Water, Nebraska, and Mary Nanick, born in Germany, actually Silesia, but his proof for his birth is, it's interesting. It's letterhead, Hill County Superintendent of Schools affidavit, school census records for the year 1923, showing his age as 12, his birth date given. So what became important there? The school census, which is there in every county. And then he submitted for a second piece, a baptismal record on printed form of the Catholic Church, giving his name as Byron Robertson Lee. And it says he was not baptized until April 26, 1923. Boy, that's important to me because I didn't know that. So there's a whole bunch of information behind these things, but there's even more questions beyond. He offered a school census and a baptismal record as proof. Oh no, I want to know a whole bunch more about that baptismal record and why he wasn't baptized until 1923. What was going on here? And I'm going to want to find that other thing. And he'd gone to a notary public to get that signed. Why did he do it? Because he finally wanted to get into the Social Security system. He was by then actually living in Ferndale, near Big Fork, Montana. I never saw this in our family records at home. So I'm really grateful that the records are out there. So I found direct evidence. It appeared to answer my research questions. There was an official certificate. There were a couple of them, actually. I haven't seen that baptism certificate, but it makes reference to it. I found indirect evidence where I've got to combine it in order to draw some conclusions about George Eskew versus the name Byron Robertson Lee. Negative evidence, that might be, well, I was expecting to find a particular thing, but I didn't find it. So if I went to Choteau County Records and I had been looking for Byron Robertson Lee on May 2, 1911, that information would not have been there, but I would have recorded it at that point in his file saying, it should have been here. Then later on, if I found the other, I could say, oh, there's a reason that it's not there. And that is because he was born under another name. I would have been better off maybe asking for just the name of his mom, because if they would have had it indexed somehow with her maiden name, that would have been the way in which I would have found that particular piece of information. So I could have recorded various kinds of information there. But my questions, my who, what, when, where, why, and in the case of this, were very important to me. I could record the evidence directly as it is seen on the particular document and get it into my timeline and get it into my person's file on Roots Magic so that it would be there for forever, how long Carolyn takes care of the information after I'm gone. And I could begin to look at that and say, okay, I've got it in some particular places now, and I have it verified, and I've got the sources in my hand, those documents. Next week, we'll work with those documents really quickly. I'm hoping you bring some documents and we can do a little interaction at the end of the hour if you want to, with me helping you with documents, any kind of documents if you want. I'm going to be sorry for that one, Linda, when I say any kind of documents. But the critical reading strategy for you is include all the places and people where the certificate can be recorded. So it's going to be recorded. Let me see. It's going to be recorded under my dad's name if I'm looking at his birth certificates. I've got 2 of them to record, actually, and they have differing information. So that's going to be really interesting, isn't it? I'm going to record it in his dad's file, in his mom's file, at least. So there's 3 people right there that I'm going to record it in. How does that certificate affect each family member? Well, now I've got to go back and take a look and say, so Mary Nanick Eskew, who was married to Oscar Eskew in 1905 in Great Falls, Montana, later on becomes Mary Nanick Lee, which is interesting. When you look at their 50th wedding anniversary, there's no record in there of SQ that I can see. Be aware that these certificates can differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, meaning different countries. Take a look at the state documents because those state certificates also change from time to time. And be aware that after 1975, certain things came under family privacy. Just make sure you understand the laws and rules of registration for the time period for that certificate and in the state or the country, and make those important notes for your future readers. It isn't just that you found this piece of information about one of their ancestors. It's that you interacted with that particular certificate and wrote down what your thoughts were at that point and why that happened. Maybe you're even going to say, I asked myself these 7 questions and got these answers. Then I asked myself, where did SQ come from? What's going on here? That is the one that helped trigger for me the idea that I should go look for court records in Havre, Montana, in the district court to see if he really did make an official name change. And he did. He did do that. It's just that his mom fibbed to be able to give him that Lee name. I always kind of giggle at that because my brother Gary would always say, well, you know, the Lee name, that's a really important thing for us all to protect and do. And today I find out that unless I can ever find the mysterious, never lurking, ever gone George Lee, then we are the well, we're the second generation. I guess my dad's generation used the last name of Lee. Certificate tips, briefly, use indexes where possible and ask at the courthouse if you can actually look at their index. Some will permit it. Sometimes they might even bring the book up and push it partially across. Most of them will not allow you, nor should they allow you, to just look at the index without being supervised. That's just good record keeping. When searching for any of these certificates, remember, they were often filed in chronological order by the date they were received, not the date of the event. That really affects where you're going to look for those death certificates or birth certificates that are an interrupted kind of thing, where the person actually was born and then it's 40 years before they ask for that. So you always need to say, okay, if you do not have a birth certificate for the appropriate time and place for this birth, do you have a file of delayed birth documents that I might look through? Usually they will have those neatly indexed. It's just by the date when they were received. And for my dad, that would have been 1942, not 1911. Make sure you put that search for several years beyond when you believe the event occurred to ensure you made it through a search, and look at those delayed registrations and then seek other stuff. The only thing I've ever been able to find for my mom for a birth record is a news clipping in Kenmare, North Dakota. That's it, nothing else. And so when you are looking at, and I'm back in here for a minute, when you are looking at your particular things, you're going to see that I did give you an example on page 4 of what you could do with legal size paper in placing the certificate and document in the middle. I do this formally because otherwise I know I'm not any different than you. What I'm going to do at that point is I'm going to be looking at 1 or 2 pieces of information that really had meaning for me in that particular time. And yet I need to go look at every piece of information, and then I need to take time to record it later on. So it is very, very important that you actually take the certificate, look at it someplace, make sure you don't write on that certificate at all. Use pencil. Be very, very careful of what you're doing. If you can use legal size paper or another piece of paper or whatever, but once you have analyzed that to your satisfaction, I don't care. If you can't write a paragraph, then make a list of your observations and get them written into your notes somehow, and make sure that they might make sense to the next reader. Otherwise, I'm not saying that you're wasting that certificate, but that certificate has real power for you and real power for the next generations. And it isn't just saving the certificate. It isn't just recording it or making a scan of it so they can see it. Yes, they can see it, but if they don't have your observations, and that's especially important for the generation behind you that's just is now deceased. If they don't have your observations about it, you are missing a big bet in passing on your family history. The family history, of course, is important for all the stories you can tell and the fun things that you can work with your family. But it's also important to look at those documents carefully before you put them away. I know I took all my documents from my Beck family, the original documents that I had. I made a copy of each of them, scanned them. I've got that. But I took the original documents that I paid moolah for, just like the rest of you, and I sent them to Kandiyohi County in Minnesota, where that family first came to when they came to the United States. The reason why? Well, there's lots of people there still, lots of people around there with Beck. And so maybe they will look. The same thing with my Nanick family member who lived just a few counties over in the little town of Browerville. I made sure that all of those things went to that particular county, because it's one thing to say, well, maybe I should pass this certificate on to one person who's interested in family history. What if they toss it? You owe it to yourself and to the things that you're doing to take very, very careful care of those documents and where you pass them on, so that people have access to those particular things. I've given you some of my own birth records from my own area, from my own family and Carolyn's. Some from my dad that were a surprise, and they helped me a great deal in terms of me going back and formulating some distinct things I needed to be able to tell my family about their family. I mean, Carolyn and I have another cousin whose dad was my dad's younger brother, and he was born under the name of Lee. He probably doesn't know too much about the SQ connection, but his family needs to know. They're all gone now, so his family that is here and present right now needs to know. The other sheet that I gave you today, I gave you another little one on timeline history notes. It says that it's, then let me see if I can share it here. Let's see. I don't know. Can you see that one?
Yep.
Yes.
Epidemics and illnesses. This is just another continuation again in your timeline, making sure that you put in the epidemics and the various diseases and so on that are there. For my husband's family, his original Page family was in just right outside of Boston in 1721. And I've never looked at those records to see how many people died in that little town of Walpole during that time. But I'm going to go back and look now. And all I did was, I've got one little thing that I've ever done there, and that is this thing that I'm highlighting here, the smallpox epidemic of 1721 in the Boston area. The facts are that there were 11,000 in the Boston population then. There were 6,000 cases of smallpox and 850 or more deaths. Wow, that's a lot. And by the way, Cotton Mather was the one there saying, hey, I've heard about this thing that what you can do to inoculate someone and then they don't get it anymore. And he was being booed by the crowd there at the time, but he stuck his neck out and got many people saved because of it. Because we really don't get a smallpox vaccination for almost a century after that. But I can formulate beginning questions. Did I have ancestors who experienced this epidemic? Did any of them or their family members become infected and die? Did anyone get vaccinated? What did the newspapers say? Were there fan club members from the little town of Walpole, even if there wasn't anything from the Page family? Was there a diary entry, an interview? What about the notes from the council in that town? Because that literally was also the way in which they recorded births, deaths, and marriages. And then I will be able to write a statement about his family concerning their time. Did they survive by isolating? If I found out that no one died. And here's some other places you can look for pieces of information like that. It's pretty easy to go look for some of this stuff. There's also another neat thing that you can do. It's just, you can go out and in Google, just look for the worst epidemics ever. Put it in quotation marks. And this neat thing comes up from US Health that tells you all about the worst epidemics ever, so that you can look at these things and perhaps look at your family in the time of cholera or the time of COVID or the time of whatever. These are pretty good opportunities for you to look at and some great places for you to see some things. So I left you some possible reading there, which you can ignore, but Jan likes to give you reading. Then the last thing that I will send you today is I will send this to you, send Mary a great deal of this, well, just the one, so that she can send on to people in Helena. And I will send this guided reading process for analyzing certificates here, because we're all different. We can all look at the same certificate. We gain different things from it. And this is just a reminder of how you use that scaffolded process. It's a one-pager that you can put beside you. That's a little easier, maybe, rather than saying, now what all did Jan say? And I have to look at page 4. So you'll be able to look at this one particular thing to see what is going on. And then another little note for you on the next page in terms of learning to examine your own background, your own context, your ideas about what you do and what you think about something, because it is going to affect the summaries. That's affect, not effect. I'll correct myself here. It is going to affect the summaries you write about your ancestors. If you don't think too much about it at the time and say, well, yeah, they had 6 kids die in a row, but that stuff happened then. Then if that's the only statement you write, you maybe have not considered the trauma of what happens when a child dies in your family or whatever. So there's all kinds of interesting background, all kinds of interesting information. This is a curated process. It's really neat because it's something, of course, that you can use with your kids or your grandkids or your great grandkids. Who, what, when, where, why. Those are things that we've been using for a long time. And you say, shoot, Jan, that's something that I've just been using. Well, if you use those every time, that's what we're talking about when we talk about using intellectual technology consistently. If you're peripatetic, that is, you only use some things sometimes and you don't make it a practice, then you're really not employing some of the best skills that could really help you in genealogy. So that's about reading and recording death, marriage, and birth certificates today. One more thing I wanted to talk to you about is, of course, this wonderful thing that begins today, and that's called Roots Tech 2021. And hopefully lots of us are signed up for this. I would hope that you are. If you're not, here's the deal. You can sign up for it by going out to your family search sign up and just sign up through there. Or you can just go out and say Roots Tech 21 and you don't need to sign up. You can use the materials. I am delighted to be able to say that there's hundreds and hundreds of things for you to look at in anywhere from 11 to 14 languages about genealogy, and you're going to get to have access to them for the next 365 days. The LDS church happens to be the platform, but it's way bigger than that. If you've ever been to Roots Tech in Salt Lake City, it's always been wonderful. Linda Long and I attended in like, I think 2014 or 2015, because NGS was also there at the same time. And we were amazed then at about, 15,000, maybe 20,000 people who were attending at that large convention center. This whole thing, Roots Tech, is about, or it started out to be, first of all, a competition, a place where people could come and bring the latest new genealogy technology that was coming forth. And there were, and there still are, some real rewards for various kinds of technology, money prizes and so on, because then big companies, of course, can scoop up the technology and bring it to all of us. So it started out that way 10, 11, 12 years ago, and it expanded into also a way in which you could see speakers who were inspirational, not just church people, but people who have, for instance, and there's two of them this time, who have gone through extraordinary circumstances in their life in terms of physical handicap and do wonderful things. It's worth listening to people like that. But then you're going to see that there are hundreds of things about genealogy, how to do Scandinavian genealogy, how to do advanced Finn genealogy, how to work with some of the latest technology. The exciting thing is that these things through this platform and through YouTube are going to be available to us for the next year entirely. And you're going to have to go out there. You don't have to necessarily sign up. It's pretty easy to get into. It's free. We all like free.
Jan, to get the 365, you have to sign in though and register.
Okay, that's valuable to know.
And the registration is real easy. You can either go to rootstech.org and do it. That's the simplest way, because that'll also push you to, if you have an account with Family History Library, with the Family Search, you can it'll push you there, and that's the easiest way to sign up. Or you can sign up, and basically all they want is your name and your email address, and that's it. And that's it. And then it's free.
Use it otherwise. Yeah, it's free.
And
but there are some.
And then you can use it, but you won't get the 365 unless you register.
Right. The neat thing is, Helena people and Great Falls people, is that if you find something when you're out there looking and you think that it would be good for our societies to look at it, or it might make a program for our societies, would you please let Mary Pitch know? Would you please let Janet Thomson and Linda Long know that that you saw something neat that you think others might look at? The reason I say that is there's so many of these things, and they are in so many languages that hopefully we're all going to have a wonderful time. One of the things you can begin to do today is they've had to start the conference already because there are over 300,000 people registered across the world. Okay, and that means that those people who are on the other side of the international date line are actually starting that conference today with the inspirational speakers. The other thing that it's there, though, that you're going to be able to look at later today, if you get in there and register or get in there to look, is you're going to be able to go look at all of the exhibits. Now, I can tell you that that's one of the most fantastic things to be able to do with something like this, is to be able to go look at the exhibits, to see the newest and the latest in technology, to see the people who are in looking at the technology prize, because they have created something that they're hoping that big companies will take on, or that they will take on themselves. You're going to see many speakers that you wouldn't get to see otherwise, and these are all free. One thing I did do for myself this morning as I went out, it was pretty easy. I went out to this thing called Roots Tech Connect, to the main stage schedule, to get the schedule for day 1, day 2, day 3 for the big names that are going to be entertainers, etc. Some of those you're going to want, some you're not. There's an Italian musicologist performing. There's a former professional golfer from Mexico. There's the founder of OurBlackAncestry.com, who is an author and genealogist. There's an international motivational speaker and New York Times best-selling author. So you're going to want to go out and take a look at that. I ran off the schedule, and it's 18 pages of information, and it is amazing to see what's there. I'd just put it on my desktop if I were you, because you can search. You have to know how to use some search terms carefully. If you're looking for Finland, also remember that if you don't find Finland, you put in Finn, F-I-N-N, for another search, or you might put in Finnish. Make sure you put in 2 N's when you do that, or whatever, because you're going to find that the searches come up structurally different when you do that. But it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really cool. I'm hoping I have a few things to share with you next week during this, because there's just a bunch. I mean, if you're interested in DNA, you can look at that. I'm interested in looking at a record analysis for the 1812 military pensions from the United States. And they've got a very, very respected speaker on that. So that's going to be one of the first places I go. So take a look, see what you think. And no matter what, even if you're not participating in it, bookmark this particular thing and keep it handy, because as you find friends in genealogy who are interested in perhaps getting started with genealogy, or immediately finding the records, where to find the records and the best advice for the War of 1812, but it's summertime, you can then recommend them into this so they can at least get started. So it's a pretty cool thing. Hopefully lots of us are signed up. I see that we had at least 21 people in here today. So I'm hoping you'll spread the word. And that's about what I have today. I've gone over 1 minute. I apologize. But does anyone have any commentary before we quit? No? Have I worn you out?
No, you've
Okay.
you've embraced us to do this stuff. That's what you've done.
There you go. Well, I will send this particular handout that I didn't send earlier. I will make sure that you all get it today. And
Yes.
hopefully all the systems are working quite well. And I wish you well with death, marriage, and birth certificates. And I hope you really do go back and search for this, and that you take time to do that scaffolded study. A scaffolded type of analysis is very, very important to you. If you learn to do these in steps and then always do this, it's going to improve your reading power greatly. So Kathy says to everybody, valuable information. Thank you, Kathy. Ron Yates, thank you. Great to see you all. Ron, good to see you. Say, hey, Colleen, hi, all of you. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you, Jan.
Bye.
Thanks, Jan.
You betcha.
Thank you, Jan.
You betcha.
Thank you, Jan.
You bet. Thanks.